My mother forgot I existed at the airport terminal. 12 missed calls, zero answers, standing there with my luggage watching families reunite while I remained invisible to my own blood. That moment of abandonment revealed everything I had refused to see about my family. The golden child versus the forgotten daughter. But what I discovered when I finally made it home that night would shatter every assumption I had about love, loyalty, and the people who were supposed to protect me. Sometimes the worst betrayals come from those closest to your heart. Before we dive into this family drama that changed everything, I want to know, where are you watching from today? If you have ever felt forgotten by your own family, hit that like button, because this story will show you that sometimes being overlooked is actually a blessing in disguise. And do not forget to subscribe because trust me, you will want to hear how this revenge story unfolds. Now let me take you back to that devastating day at the airport. My name is Seraphina, and I had just returned from my semester abroad in France. 21 years old, exhausted from 15 hours of travel, and genuinely excited to see my family after 6 months away. I had texted my mother Patricia 3 days prior with my exact flight details. She had responded with heart emojis and promises of my favorite dinner waiting at home. The baggage claim area slowly emptied as families departed with their loved ones. My phone showed 12 missed calls to my mother, 5 to my father David, and 3 to my younger brother Marcus. Nothing. Complete radio silence from the people who supposedly loved me most in this world. After 2 hours of waiting, I took an expensive taxi home, my excitement gradually morphing into hurt, then anger, and finally a cold determination to understand what was more important than their daughter returning from overseas. I walked through our front door at nearly midnight, expecting explanations, apologies, maybe even a celebration that had been delayed. Instead, I found my family in the living room casually watching television as if nothing had happened. My mother glanced up with mild surprise as though I was an unexpected pizza delivery rather than her daughter returning from abroad. "Oh, Seraphina, you are home," she said, with the emotional investment of someone commenting on the weather. "You forgot me at the airport," I stated, still processing the surreal nature of the moment. My father barely looked up from his sports highlights. "We got busy. You are old enough to figure it out." Marcus, my 18-year-old brother, snickered. "Welcome back, I guess." That night I lay in my childhood bedroom staring at ceiling stars I had stuck up in middle school, trying to understand how my own family could forget me so completely. But the real shock came the next morning when I discovered why they had been too busy to remember their daughter. While unpacking, I needed to print my university documents. I went to my father's home office to use his printer and accidentally grabbed the wrong folder from his desk. Inside were bank statements, financial documents, and correspondence that made my blood run cold. My parents had been systematically stealing from my college fund for over 2 years. The account that was supposed to contain nearly $60,000 for my education had been drained to less than $3,000. But that was not the worst part. The money had not gone to family emergencies or medical bills. It had been spent on luxury items for Marcus, a new car, expensive gaming equipment, designer clothes, and private tutoring for college prep. There were email exchanges between my parents discussing how I was smart enough to figure out college funding on my own, while Marcus needed their investment to succeed. They had convinced themselves that because I earned good grades, I would somehow manage without family support, while my average performing brother deserved every financial advantage they could provide. I photographed everything with shaking hands, my mind reeling from the betrayal. They had not forgotten to pick me up from the airport because they were busy with important matters. They had forgotten because I simply did not matter to them anymore. I was the self-sufficient daughter who required minimal attention, while Marcus was the precious son who absorbed all their resources and emotional energy. But the cruelest discovery came in an email thread between my mother and her sister, my Aunt Linda. They discussed my return from France with casual dismissiveness, with my mother writing, "Seraphina will be fine. She always lands on her feet. Marcus needs us more right now for his college applications. We are investing in our future." Reading those words felt like being stabbed through the heart. My own mother had written off my needs and feelings as irrelevant compared to my brother's perceived potential. The financial theft was devastating, but the emotional abandonment was soul-crushing. I spent the next 3 days quietly gathering evidence while pretending everything was normal. I made copies of bank statements, saved email communications, and documented every piece of evidence that showed their systematic favoritism and financial manipulation. They had stolen my educational future to fund my brother's advantages, all while maintaining the facade of loving parents. The most infuriating part was their casual attitude toward my presence. They continued treating me like an afterthought, expecting me to be grateful for basic shelter and food, while they showered Marcus with attention and resources. My father mentioned casually that I should start thinking about student loans for my remaining college years, while simultaneously discussing expensive summer programs for Marcus at dinner. My mother even had the audacity to suggest I should be proud of my independence, as if their neglect was somehow character building, rather than emotional abuse disguised as parenting. She spoke about my self-reliance like it was a gift they had given me, rather than a survival skill I had developed out of necessity. That week, I realized my entire childhood had been a pattern of this behavior that I had normalized. The missed school events, the forgotten birthdays, the expectation that I would excel without support, while Marcus received endless encouragement for mediocre efforts. I had convinced myself that their lack of attention meant I was mature and independent, when really it meant I was the unloved daughter in a family that had chosen their favorite child years ago. But as I sat in my room surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was transforming into something sharper, more focused. They had stolen my money, dismissed my value, and treated me like an inconvenience in my own home. The forgotten airport pickup was just the final insult in a long pattern of emotional and financial abuse. I was done being the understanding daughter who accepted scraps of affection. I was done being grateful for basic human decency from people who should have loved me unconditionally. They wanted to treat me like I did not matter. Fine. I would show them exactly what happened when you underestimate someone you have systematically undervalued. My parents thought they were investing in their future through Marcus. They had no idea they were about to discover the true cost of betraying their daughter. The evidence was gathered, the pattern was documented, and I was ready to teach them that some actions have consequences they never saw coming. The morning I decided to act, my mother was cheerfully making Marcus his favorite breakfast, while commenting that I should eat less because college weight was not attractive. The casual cruelty in her tone was the final trigger I needed. I walked into the kitchen with my printed evidence folder and set it calmly on the counter next to her coffee cup. "We need to have a family meeting," I announced with a voice so steady it surprised even me. My father looked annoyed at being interrupted from his newspaper. "Can this wait? I have important calls to make." "Those calls can wait. This concerns the $60,000 you have stolen from my college fund." The kitchen went dead silent. Marcus stopped mid-chew. My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips, and my father's newspaper crinkled as his grip tightened. Their faces went through a fascinating progression of emotions: confusion, recognition, panic, and finally defensive anger. "That is a strong accusation," my father said carefully. I opened the folder and began laying out bank statements across the kitchen island like playing cards in the world's most devastating poker game. "These are your own documents. This statement shows $62,000 in my education account in January 2 years ago. This statement shows the current balance of $2,800. These are receipts for Marcus's car, his gaming setup, his private tutoring, and his college prep courses, all paid for with money that legally belonged to me." My mother's face had gone pale, but she attempted damage control. "Sweetheart, you do not understand how family finances work. We were just reallocating resources where they were needed most." "Reallocating?" I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "You mean stealing? This email thread between you and Aunt Linda is particularly enlightening. Should I read it aloud? The part where you call me self-sufficient enough to not need family support while Marcus deserves investment in his future." Marcus finally found his voice. Seraphina, come on. You know I needed help with college prep. You are naturally smart. I have to work harder. The entitlement in his tone was staggering. You think stealing from my education fund is acceptable because you are lazy and average. You think I deserve to go into debt for my degree while you get a free ride on money that was never yours. Do not speak to your brother that way. My mother snapped, her protective instincts for Marcus overriding any guilt about their theft. My brother. I stood up, feeling something powerful and cold settling in my chest. My brother would never steal from me. My brother would not sit quietly while his parents robbed his sister's future. What I have is a spoiled stranger who has been enabled by parents who apparently forgot they had two children. My father tried to regain control of the conversation. You are being dramatic. Family money gets used where it is needed. You will figure out college just fine. Family money. I pulled out another document. This is the trust document Grandpa Harrison created for my education. It specifically states that this money cannot be touched except for my educational expenses or with my written consent. You forged my signature on 3 different withdrawal authorizations. That is not reallocating family resources. That is fraud. The word fraud hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. My parents exchanged panicked glances, clearly realizing they had moved far beyond family disputes into actual criminal territory. You would not dare involve outsiders in family business, my mother said, but her voice shook with uncertainty. I smiled, and I could see my expression unsettled all 3 of them. Actually, I already have. This morning, I filed a police report for fraud and theft. I also contacted the bank that manages the trust account. They are very interested in how 3 unauthorized withdrawals totaling $57,000 occurred with forged signatures. Apparently, they have security cameras from those transaction dates. Marcus dropped his fork. You called the police on your own family. I called the police on criminals who happened to share my DNA, I corrected. You stopped being my family the moment you decided I was worth less than a gaming computer. My father was trying to maintain his authority, but sweat beaded on his forehead. You are making a mistake, Seraphina. This will destroy our family. Our family. I gathered my evidence, feeling more powerful than I had in years. You destroyed our family when you chose Marcus over me, when you stole my future to fund his comfort, when you forgot me at the airport because I was not worth remembering. I'm just making your choices public. My mother started crying, but they were manipulative tears designed to make me feel guilty. How can you do this to us? We are your parents. We love you. Love. I paused at the kitchen doorway and turned back to face them. Love does not steal. Love does not forget. Love does not treat one child as disposable while treating another as precious. What you feel for me is not love. It is tolerance. And I am done tolerating your version of family. The police will not do anything, my father called after me, desperation creeping into his voice. This is a family matter. Actually, Detective Morrison was very interested in the case. She said educational fraud involving trust funds is taken quite seriously, especially when it involves forgery. She will be here tomorrow morning with a warrant to examine your financial records. I left them in the kitchen, probably having their first honest conversation about me in years while I went to my room to pack. But this was only the beginning of my plan. The police report was just the first step in showing them that actions have consequences. That afternoon, I drove to my grandfather's lawyer, Mr. Chen, who had handled the trust paperwork. When I showed him the evidence, his face darkened with professional anger. This is exactly what your grandfather feared might happen, he said grimly. He specifically designed the trust to prevent this kind of manipulation. Your parents have committed several felonies, and the civil liability alone could destroy them financially. Good, I said simply. They destroyed my trust in family. Now I want to destroy their comfortable assumption that they can betray people without consequences. By evening, my phone was buzzing with panicked messages from extended family members. My parents had clearly started making damage control calls, probably spinning some version where I was the unreasonable daughter attacking the family over money. But I was no longer the forgotten daughter they could manipulate and dismiss. I was their reckoning, and I was just getting started. The next morning brought Detective Morrison and a financial crimes investigator to our front door with a warrant. I watched from my bedroom window as my parents stood in their pajamas, forced to hand over computers, financial documents, and banking records. The look of horror on their faces as neighbors began emerging from their houses to witness the spectacle was deeply satisfying. Marcus texted me frantically, "Fix this! They are taking my computer too." I responded simply, "Your computer was bought with stolen money. It was never yours to begin with." But the police investigation was just the foundation of my larger plan. I had spent years being the responsible daughter who handled problems quietly, and I had developed a network of relationships my parents knew nothing about. It was time to activate those connections and show my family what real consequences look like. My first call was to Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, who had been complicit in their dismissal of my value through their email exchanges. I knew she prided herself on being the moral center of our extended family, often posting sanctimonious social media content about integrity and family values. "Aunt Linda," I said when she answered, my voice deceptively calm, "I have something interesting to share with you about family values and integrity." I forwarded her the complete email thread where she and my mother discussed my worthlessness compared to Marcus, along with the evidence of the theft. Within an hour, my phone rang with her panicked voice. "Seraphina, sweetheart, you have to understand. Your mother was just venting. We never meant. You never meant for me to find out that my own aunt thinks I am disposable," I interrupted. "That you actively encouraged my parents to steal from me because Marcus deserved the money more. Your exact words were, 'Seraphina will be fine, she always is.'" Well, Aunt Linda, I am fine. I am fine enough to make sure everyone knows exactly who you and my parents really are. "You cannot share private family communications," she pleaded. "Watch me," I said, and hung up. Next, I contacted my cousin Rebecca, Aunt Linda's daughter, who had always competed with me academically and socially. Rebecca was starting her senior year of high school and desperately needed family financial support for college applications. I knew Aunt Linda had been bragging about having money saved for Rebecca's education. I sent Rebecca screenshots of her mother's emails calling me worthless and disposable, along with an explanation of how Aunt Linda had encouraged the theft of my college fund while planning to protect Rebecca's educational money. Rebecca called me within minutes, her voice shaking with rage. "My mother said these things about you. She encouraged your parents to steal from you." While I have been stressed about college costs, she was laughing about someone else's daughter being robbed. "Your mother thinks some daughters matter more than others," I confirmed. "She was perfectly comfortable with me losing my education fund as long as it did not affect you." Rebecca's voice turned cold with determination. "She is about to learn that her daughter has very strong opinions about family loyalty and theft." By afternoon, Rebecca had confronted her mother publicly at a family barbecue, reading Aunt Linda's cruel emails aloud in front of grandparents, cousins, and family friends. Aunt Linda's reputation as the family's moral authority crumbled in real time as relatives realized she had actively encouraged the financial abuse of her niece. But my most powerful ally emerged from an unexpected source. My grandfather's best friend, Judge William Torres, had been handling estate planning with our family lawyer when the trust fraud came to light. Judge Torres called me personally that evening. "Seraphina, I helped your grandfather set up that trust because he was worried about exactly this scenario. He loved you deeply and wanted to ensure your education was protected. What your parents did would have broken his heart." "It has broken mine," I admitted quietly. "Your grandfather also established a secondary trust that your parents never knew about. He suspected they might favor Marcus and wanted to ensure you had additional protection. There is another $45,000 available for your education completely separate from what they stole." I sat in stunned silence. Even from beyond the grave, my grandfather had tried to protect me from my own parents. "But here is what your parents do not know," Judge Torres continued. Your grandfather also included provisions for what would happen if anyone attempted to defraud the primary trust. If theft occurred, the secondary fund could be used not just for education, but for legal fees to prosecute the thieves. Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying your grandfather gave you the resources to fight back, and I am personally willing to ensure his wishes are honored. Your parents thought they were stealing from a defenseless daughter. They actually stole from someone whose grandfather anticipated their greed and prepared accordingly. Judge Torres connected me with Elena Rodriguez, one of the most feared family attorneys in the state. Elena specialized in financial fraud cases within families and had a reputation for destroying people who stole from their own children. When I met Elena the next day, she reviewed my evidence with professional appreciation. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of educational fraud I have seen. Your parents not only stole from you, they documented their contempt for you in writing. We can pursue criminal charges, civil recovery, and punitive damages that will ensure they never financially recover. I want them to understand that their actions have consequences, I said. Oh, they will understand. Elena smiled sharply. By the time we finish with them, they will lose their house, their savings, and possibly their freedom. And your brother Marcus, every penny spent on his advantages will be clawed back with interest. But Elena also provided something unexpected validation that my feelings were not just hurt emotions, but legitimate responses to systematic abuse. What your parents did is called financial abuse, and it is a recognized form of domestic violence, she explained. They isolated you emotionally while systematically stealing your resources. The forgotten airport pickup, the casual dismissal of your needs, the obvious favoritism. These are all tactics abusers use to maintain control and justify their behavior. Hearing a professional name what I had experienced was incredibly healing. I was not being dramatic or oversensitive. I was responding appropriately to being victimized by people who should have protected me. That week, I also connected with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a family therapist who specialized in parental narcissism and golden child dynamics. Dr. Mitchell helped me understand that my family's treatment of me followed a textbook pattern of scapegoating. Your parents designated Marcus as the golden child who could do no wrong, and you as the scapegoat who was expected to absorb blame and receive minimal resources, she explained. They convinced themselves this was normal family dynamics, but it was actually systematic emotional abuse designed to maintain their preferred narrative. Dr. Mitchell also connected me with other survivors of family financial abuse. I discovered an entire community of people whose families had stolen from them, manipulated them, and then expected gratitude for basic care. These connections became a support network that my family could never provide. Meanwhile, word of the police investigation was spreading through our community. My parents had always presented themselves as upstanding citizens, involved in church activities and community organizations. Now their friends and neighbors were learning about fraud, theft, and the systematic abuse of their daughter. Marcus was becoming increasingly panicked as the reality set in. His college applications were due soon, and the private tutoring, test prep courses, and extracurricular activities funded by stolen money were his only advantages. Without my college fund, he was just an average student from a family about to be destroyed by criminal charges. "Can you please just drop this?" he begged during one of his many texts. "I will pay you back after college." "With what money?" I responded. "You have never worked a day in your life. You do not even know how to earn money, because it has always been handed to you from my account." By the end of that week, I had built an alliance network that my parents never saw coming. A judge, a powerful attorney, a therapist, extended family members, and a community of abuse survivors, all supporting my fight for justice. My parents thought they were dealing with their forgotten daughter, who would eventually forgive and move on. They had no idea they were now facing people who understood exactly what they had done and had the power to ensure they faced appropriate consequences. The real war was just beginning, and I was no longer fighting alone. 3 weeks into building my case, I received a call that shattered my newfound confidence. Elena Rodriguez, my attorney, requested an emergency meeting with a tone that made my stomach drop. "We have a problem," she said when I arrived at her office. "Someone has been feeding information to your parents' legal team." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean?" "Your parents hired Morrison and Associates, one of the most expensive defense firms in the state. They somehow knew about your grandfather's secondary trust, our legal strategy, and even details about our witness list that I had only shared with you and two people on my team." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. "How is that possible?" Elena's expression was grim. "Someone close to you has been reporting everything back to them. Your parents' lawyer filed motions yesterday that directly counter strategies we discussed privately. They even knew about Judge Torres's involvement before we had officially documented it." My mind raced through the people I had trusted with information. Judge Torres was above suspicion. Dr. Mitchell was bound by professional ethics. My cousin Rebecca had been genuinely angry about her mother's betrayal. That left. It was my cousin Marcus's girlfriend, wasn't it? I said, the pieces falling into place. "How did you know?" "Because she was the only person I trusted who had access to both sides of this situation. Jessica has been dating Marcus for 2 years. I thought she was my friend, but she was reporting everything back to him." The betrayal cut deeper than my parents' original theft. Jessica had sat with me for hours while I explained the emotional abuse, the financial manipulation, the years of feeling worthless in my own family. She had comforted me, expressed outrage on my behalf, and offered to help however she could, all while secretly recording our conversations and sharing my legal strategy with the people who had stolen from me. Elena pulled up security footage from her office building. "Your parents paid Jessica $15,000 for information. She has been wearing a recording device to our meetings." Watching the footage of Jessica leaving Elena's building and immediately calling someone on her phone felt like watching my trust being murdered in real time. She had manipulated my pain for money, just like my parents had manipulated my love for family advantage. "There's more," Elena continued. "Jessica also accessed your phone when you were staying at her apartment last week. She copied text messages between you and your support network, including communications with other abuse survivors who are willing to testify about similar family situations." The violation was complete. Jessica had not just betrayed my legal case, she had invaded the private communications of other victims who had trusted me with their stories. "Can we recover from this?" I asked, feeling defeat creeping in. "It's going to be much harder. Your parents' lawyers now know our entire strategy and have had time to prepare counter-arguments. They also filed a restraining order claiming you are harassing the family with false accusations using information Jessica provided about your emotional state and intentions." I sat in Elena's office feeling the walls closing in. My parents had outmaneuvered me by corrupting someone I had trusted completely. They had taken my vulnerability and weaponized it against me through someone who pretended to care. That evening, I confronted Jessica at her apartment. When I knocked on the door, her face went pale with guilt before she even spoke. "Seraphina, I can explain." "Can you?" I held up my phone, which was recording our conversation. "Can you explain why you took $15,000 to betray someone who trusted you with their trauma?" Jessica's composure crumbled. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. Marcus was going to break up with me if his family got destroyed. His parents said you were being vindictive and trying to ruin everyone's lives over money. So you decided to ruin my life instead. They said you would be fine. You always land on your feet. Marcus needs this family support for his future, and I need Marcus for mine." The casual dismissal of my worth was exactly what I had heard from my own family. Jessica had absorbed their narrative that I was disposable while Marcus was precious. "You recorded private therapy sessions, Jessica. You invaded communications with abuse survivors. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed every person who trusted me with their story." "I never meant for it to go that far," she said weakly. "But you did it anyway. For money." Just like my parents stole from me for money to give to Marcus. You are exactly like them. I left Jessica's apartment feeling more alone than I had since the airport abandonment. The people I had trusted most had all chosen Marcus's comfort over my justice. My parents, my extended family, and now someone I had considered a close friend, had all decided I was acceptable collateral damage in protecting their golden child. But the betrayal had also clarified something important. I was surrounded by people who saw relationships as transactional. My parents saw me as a resource to be exploited for Marcus's benefit. Jessica saw my pain as information to be sold for relationship security. None of them saw me as a person deserving loyalty and protection. Elena called an emergency strategy meeting for the next morning. We need to assume they know everything we have planned. Your parents' legal team has filed motions to dismiss all charges, claiming the trust money was used for legitimate family expenses and that you are a vindictive daughter trying to destroy your family's reputation. What are our options? We start over. New strategy, new evidence gathering, and this time we trust no one except people with professional, ethical obligations. But I have to warn you. This betrayal has given your parents a significant advantage. They're portraying you as unstable and vindictive, using your own words against you through Jessica's recordings. I realized that my parents had not just stolen my money, they had systematically destroyed my ability to trust people. Every relationship in my life had been compromised by their influence and manipulation. Marcus texted me that evening. I hope you're happy. Jessica is devastated and our parents might go to jail because you can't let go of some money. I stared at his message, marveling at his complete inability to understand that this was about far more than money. He still saw me as the problem rather than recognizing that our parents were criminals and his girlfriend was a paid informant. But as I sat alone in my apartment that night, something shifted inside me. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also freed me from the illusion that these people could change, or that our relationships could be repaired. I was no longer fighting to fix my family or maintain relationships. I was fighting for justice, period. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon against people who underestimate you is their own arrogance in thinking they have already won. Jessica's betrayal had given my parents confidence that they had neutralized my threat. They thought they knew all my cards and had successfully undermined my case. They had no idea what I was about to do next. The morning after discovering Jessica's betrayal, I received an unexpected call that would change everything. Miss Seraphina, this is Margaret Chen from Harbor Bank's Fraud Investigation Department. We've been conducting our own investigation into the trust account irregularities, and we need to meet with you immediately. Margaret Chen turned out to be a meticulous financial investigator with 20 years of experience in banking fraud. When I arrived at her office, she had spread across her desk the most comprehensive evidence of my parents' theft I had ever seen. Your case triggered our internal fraud detection system, she explained. When we investigated the forged signatures, we discovered something your parents didn't know about. Your grandfather installed biometric security measures on the trust account in addition to signature verification. She showed me computer screens displaying fingerprint analysis and digital timestamp records. Every legitimate transaction required both your signature and your fingerprint scan. The 3 large withdrawals that drained your account show forged signatures, but more importantly, they show your mother's fingerprints, not yours. I stared at the evidence in amazement. They left fingerprints on fraudulent transactions. Your mother physically handled all the withdrawal paperwork. She probably thought the signature was the only security measure, but your grandfather was more thorough than she realized. We have definitive proof that Patricia Morrison committed identity fraud, forgery, and theft of trust funds. But Margaret had even more devastating evidence. We also tracked where the stolen money went. Your parents opened a separate account specifically for Marcus's expenses, which they tried to hide from the original fraud investigation. Every purchase made with your education money is documented with timestamps, locations, and purposes. She showed me a detailed financial timeline that was more thorough than anything Elena and I had compiled. The bank's investigation had uncovered hidden accounts, secret credit cards, and even cash withdrawals that my parents had used to fund Marcus's lifestyle while claiming they were struggling financially. There's something else, Margaret continued. Your grandfather's friend, Judge Torres, contacted us yesterday. He informed us about the secondary trust and your grandfather's anti-fraud provisions. Based on our findings, the bank is prepared to file federal charges against your parents for wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. Money laundering. They moved your money through multiple accounts to obscure the theft trail. That elevates this from simple family financial disputes to serious federal crimes with mandatory prison sentences. Margaret also revealed something that made Jessica's betrayal irrelevant. We've been monitoring your parents' communications since the investigation began. We have recordings of them discussing the theft, planning their legal defense, and coordinating with their attorney, using information they obtained illegally through Jessica Rodriguez. You recorded them. With proper warrants, yes. Your parents' phone calls, emails, and text messages over the past month are part of our evidence file, including conversations where they laugh about your emotional distress and plan to use Jessica's information to destroy your credibility. Hearing that my parents had been recorded mocking my pain while strategizing to defeat my quest for justice was initially devastating. But then Margaret played a particular recording that changed my entire perspective. It was my mother's voice talking to my father. Seraphina always was too trusting. She actually believed Jessica cared about her. Some people never learn that loyalty is something you buy, not something you deserve. Marcus understands that. That's why he'll succeed, and she won't. The casual cruelty in her tone was shocking, but what followed was worse. My father responded, "At least Jessica earned her money. 15,000 to neutralize Seraphina's case was the best investment we've made. Now we just need to prove she's mentally unstable and vindictive, and no one will believe her accusations." They had not just stolen my money and betrayed my trust. They had been planning to destroy my reputation and mental health credibility as part of their legal strategy. The recording revealed a level of calculated malice that went far beyond family dysfunction into deliberate psychological warfare. But the most damaging recording came from a three-way call between my parents and Jessica, where they coached her on what information to gather and how to manipulate my emotional vulnerability. "Get her to admit she wants revenge," my mother instructed Jessica. "Make her sound angry and vindictive in the recordings. We need her to look like someone who would lie about her own family for money." Jessica's voice responded, "She trusts me completely. I can get her to say whatever you need." My father added, "Remember, you're not just earning that 15,000. You're protecting Marcus's future. Seraphina has always been selfish and dramatic. Now she's trying to destroy our son's opportunities out of jealousy." Listening to the three of them conspire to manipulate my trauma was initially heartbreaking. But then I realized something powerful. They had documented their own criminal conspiracy in detail. Every strategy session, every lie they planned to tell, every manipulation they coordinated was now evidence against them. Margaret smiled when she saw my expression change from devastation to determination. "This is why we wanted to meet with you before proceeding. Your parents have handed us a complete record of their crimes, including new felonies they committed while trying to cover up the original theft. What happens now? Federal prosecutors are taking over the case. Your parents will face charges in federal court where conviction rates are over 90% and sentences are mandatory. They can't plea bargain their way out of documented wire fraud and money laundering charges." Margaret also connected me with someone who would become my most powerful advocate, Special Agent David Kim from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. Agent Kim specialized in family financial abuse cases and had been following my situation since the bank filed their federal report. "Cases like yours are more common than people realize," Agent Kim explained during our meeting. "Families who steal from their children often follow the same patterns: financial theft, emotional manipulation, reputation destruction, and finally victim blaming. Your parents have done everything by the textbook. Does that help us? It means we know exactly how to prosecute them. We also know how to protect you from their retaliation attempts. Your parents are about to learn that federal investigators don't care about family dynamics or sob stories. We care about documented crimes, and they've committed plenty. But Agent Kim provided something even more valuable than legal expertise. He connected me with other survivors of family financial abuse who had successfully prosecuted their relatives and rebuilt their lives. The hardest part isn't winning the legal case, he said. It's accepting that some people, even family members, are simply not capable of genuine love or loyalty. But once you accept that truth, you become incredibly powerful. That week, I met Sarah Williams, a woman whose parents had stolen her inheritance to fund her brother's failed business ventures. Sarah had not only recovered her money through federal prosecution, but had built a successful life completely independent from her toxic family. The day I realized my parents saw me as a resource rather than a daughter was the day I became free, Sarah told me. You're not losing a family. You're escaping from people who never saw you as family in the first place. Through Sarah's network, I connected with an entire community of people who had faced similar betrayals and chosen justice over false peace. These relationships became the foundation for something I had never experienced: unconditional support from people who understood exactly what I had endured. My parents thought Jessica's betrayal had destroyed my case and isolated me from support. Instead, it had led me to allies with the power to ensure they faced consequences they never imagined possible. The evidence was now overwhelming. The federal case was proceeding, and I finally had genuine advocates fighting beside me. My parents had no idea that their victory celebration was about to become their destruction. 6 months later, I stood in federal court watching my parents receive their sentences. The judge's words were measured but devastating. Patricia Morrison, you are sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. David Morrison, you will serve 15 months for conspiracy and fraud. Additionally, you will pay full restitution of $112,000, including interest, penalties, and damages to your daughter. The amount was double what they had stolen because federal law required penalties for the pain and suffering their crimes had caused. Marcus sat behind them, finally understanding that his parents were actual criminals, not victims of my vindictiveness. But the criminal convictions were only the beginning of their consequences. Elena had filed a civil lawsuit that resulted in the seizure of their house cars and savings accounts. Every luxury item purchased with my stolen money was repossessed and sold to fund my restitution. Marcus lost his car, his gaming equipment, and his private tutoring because everything had been bought with crime proceeds. The community consequences were equally devastating. Their church expelled them for theft and fraud. My father lost his job when his employer discovered his criminal convictions. My mother's social circle abandoned her when the details of their financial abuse became public record. Aunt Linda faced her own reckoning when Rebecca publicly shared the email evidence of her encouragement of the theft. Family gatherings became impossible as relatives chose sides, with most supporting the granddaughter who had been victimized over the adults who had enabled the abuse. Jessica discovered that cooperating with criminals had its own price. When her role as a paid informant became public during the trial, her reputation was destroyed. Marcus broke up with her once he realized she had been manipulating both sides for money, and her friends abandoned her for betraying someone who had trusted her with trauma. But the most satisfying consequence was watching my parents realize they had lost everything while gaining nothing. Marcus's college applications were disasters without the advantages stolen money had provided. Their golden child turned out to be completely unprepared for life without their financial support and manipulation. Meanwhile, my own life had transformed completely. The secondary trust fund my grandfather had established, combined with the full restitution from my parents, meant I could complete college debt-free and even pursue graduate school. Judge Torres helped me transfer to a prestigious university where I studied criminology, inspired by my own experience with family financial abuse. Dr. Mitchell continued working with me as I processed the grief of losing my family and the joy of discovering my own strength. You didn't lose a family, she reminded me during one session. You escaped from people who were systematically destroying your sense of self-worth. That's not loss. That's liberation. The community of abuse survivors I had connected with became my chosen family. Sarah Williams became like an older sister mentoring me through the legal process and beyond. Agent Kim helped me understand that seeking justice wasn't revenge, it was holding people accountable for their choices. I also discovered that my experience had value beyond my own healing. I began speaking at conferences about family financial abuse, helping other victims recognize the patterns of manipulation and theft that I had learned to normalize. My story became part of educational programs for bank employees, therapists, and law enforcement officers. The most healing development came from an unexpected source. My grandfather's lawyer revealed that my grandfather had left me a letter to be delivered when I turned 25, or if I ever faced family betrayal, whichever came first. The letter was heartbreaking and prophetic. My dear Seraphina, if you are reading this, it means my fears about your parents' favoritism toward Marcus have proven justified. I want you to know that I always saw your intelligence, your integrity, and your strength. I also saw how they treated you as less important than your brother, and it broke my heart. The trusts I established for you are not just money. They are my way of protecting you from people who should have loved you unconditionally, but instead saw you as disposable. You deserve better than their version of family, and I hope you find people who recognize your worth. Reading my grandfather's words was like receiving permission to choose my own definition of family, one based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than blood obligation and manipulation. 2 years after the trial, I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in criminology and a specialization in family financial abuse. My thesis research helped identify patterns that banks now use to detect educational fund theft. My parents were still serving their sentences, and Marcus was struggling through community college while living with relatives who had grown tired of supporting him. I had not spoken to any of them since the sentencing, and I felt no desire to reconcile. Dr. Mitchell helped me understand that forgiveness did not require relationship restoration with people who had proven themselves incapable of genuine remorse or change. Instead, I built relationships with people who supported my growth and celebrated my achievements. Sarah Williams attended my graduation, along with Agent Kim Margaret Chen and other members of my chosen family. Judge Torres gave a speech about my grandfather's pride in my resilience and success. The most meaningful moment came when I received a call from a young woman whose parents had stolen her inheritance to fund her brother's wedding and house down payment. She had found my contact information through a victim advocacy website and wanted guidance on pursuing justice. I read about your case online, she said. I need to know if it's really possible to hold family members accountable for theft without destroying yourself in the process. Not only is it possible, I told her, it's the best decision I ever made. You don't owe loyalty to people who steal from you even if they share your DNA. You deserve justice, and you deserve people in your life who recognize your value. Helping her connect with resources and legal support reminded me why my fight had been worthwhile. Justice was not just about my own healing. It was about refusing to let family abuse be normalized or hidden. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by pictures of my chosen family and awards from my advocacy work, feeling genuinely grateful for the airport abandonment that had started my journey toward justice. My parents thought they were discarding their worthless daughter, but they had actually freed me to discover my own power and worth. The pain of family betrayal never completely disappears, but it transforms into strength when you choose accountability over enabling truth over false peace and chosen family over blood obligation. My parents had taught me that some people see relationships as transactional rather than unconditional. But my chosen family taught me that genuine love exists. It just doesn't always come from the people you expect. I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced family members who treated you as less valuable than their favorite child? Have you had to choose between family loyalty and your own justice? Share your story in the comments because your experience might help someone else realize they're not alone in facing these impossible choices. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through betrayal and building the family you actually deserve. Thank you for listening to my journey from forgotten daughter to empowered survivor. And remember, sometimes the people who abandon you are actually setting you free to find the love and respect you were always meant to have.